Hi everyone, Tom Wolf here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Granular engine in Arturia Pigments. Now, I'm a big fan of granular synthesis, and it has a lot of sound design applications, from creating pads to creating textures to creating keys, and you can use it as a kind of tool as well. So you can create these kind of scattered sounds, or you can use it to really kind of hone in on a particular part of a particular sample, and you can kind of get the characteristics of that sample whilst completely changing the sound. So it's a tool that I think is really worth knowing how to use, and Arturia Pigments has a really good granular engine. So to use the granular engine, we need to set the engine to the sample, and then we're just going to use the default sample that's loaded up here, which is the Grand Piano C3. So that sounds like this. Okay, so very kind of bread and butter piano sound. Okay, so we'll switch on the granular engine here, and the first thing that we can see is we can change our start point. So we're starting to get that granular sound already, but we can change our start point within the sample. Okay, so I'll hold down a key, and as I turn this knob, you can see this sort of big white line here that's moving across. So this determines where we're kind of reading our sample from. Okay. So we can then select the shape of the grain. So you'll see we've got a triangle here. So we can select this menu and we can actually change the shape of the grains, and you can see it changing here. So this is actually going to change the kind of characteristics of the sound. So we can also kind of move the middle point either side here. So if I hold down a key, so when we move it to the left and we've got this kind of sharp start, you can probably hear there, we're getting quite a kind of rough beginning to that sound. Whereas when we extend that out, it smooths it off quite a way. And then when we get to the other side, we've got this kind of reversing sound that's happening, and that is purely because of the slope. So it's kind of like when you have the attack for a sound. So if you have the attack completely off, you're going to get a really abrupt sound, and if you turn the attack up so that you've got a kind of smoother sound, that's essentially what we're doing by changing the shape. So we can also obviously change shapes. So if we select Chew key, you can see we can have it as a square, or we can kind of round off the curve there. So essentially, to the left, we're going to get, slightly disjointed sounds, which if that's what you want, that's how you get that sound. And if we move the shape to the right, we're going to get a smoother playback of those samples. And it's going to be the same with others. So we've got trapezoid. It's similar to Chew key, but the Chew key has got the kind of curved edges into the straight bits, whereas the trapezoid does not. So you can play about with the different shapes and see what you get. So I'm going to set it to Chew key so that you've got a slightly smoother sample. Okay, so this knob here selects the size of our grains, and you see this little menu underneath. We can actually select whether we want them to be tempo synced or not. At the moment, I'm going to leave it without tempo syncing. And it starts by default here. If we turn that down, that's going to give us shorter grains. And it's going to sound a bit more kind of glitchy. Whereas if we turn the size up, we're going to get a smoother sound. And it almost doesn't actually sound like it's kind of cutting it up into grains. It just sounds like quite a long, sustained note. We can then also randomize the size as well using this control. So if we select that menu, we can actually choose whether we want the sizes to get shorter randomly, longer randomly, or in both directions either side of our time. So if we leave this around there, we'll turn this up. You can start to hear that kind of randomized there. So we're starting to get longer and shorter grains, and it is getting this more kind of random, inconsistent feel to it rather than this kind of smoothed off sound by turning that randomizer up. And that's pretty good for kind of creating life in this. So obviously, if you don't have it randomized, you're going to get the same size grains every single time. And that is going to have a kind of predictability to it. Whereas if you turn the randomizer up, you can then kind of add an element of unpredictability and just kind of more natural movement within the sound. So then we can also randomize the volume of these grains. So now you can kind of hear some louder sounds, some quieter sounds, some not even really sounding at all. So we can also control the width of this granular sample. So this essentially is going to control how wide it's sounding and how far into the stereo spectrum these grains are going to be placed. So you can turn it all the way down and we've got it essentially in mono. Or we can turn that up to get a wider kind of stereo feel. And obviously you're going to have to be wearing headphones to, hear this properly. But that gives us a much wider sound. But we can also change this to panning as well, which essentially randomizes where the sound is panned. So the different grains kind of get panned left and right and randomly assigned to both. So you get this sort of scattered stereo field. So let's just kind of turn that up. There you go, and you can sort of hear it just bouncing about in the stereo image. Let's just swap that back to width. So we've also got this limit control here, and that allows us to set the maximum number of grains that can be used at any point in time. So this will change the characteristics of the sound, but it's also really good for kind of controlling the CPU usage of your computer, because granular synthesis can be incredibly CPU intensive. And if you've got a big project file, that's not necessarily going to work. So the lower the limit, you do kind of lose some of that quality, but you will also kind of gain a little bit more CPU headroom for other stuff that you've got happening in that track. So if we turn that down, the lowest we can go is 3. So obviously not a lot happening there. And you can hear as we turn it up, it's just getting smoother and smoother and smoother. And of course, there's an upper limit as well, which is 256. Okay, so let's have a look at our density now. So whereas the size sets the different, lengths of the grains, the density controls how often they kind of generate. So we can turn that down. You can hear we're getting really kind of slow generation of grains. And if we turn the time up, it becomes a little bit more kind of smooth. But then we can turn the density up and we kind of actively hear it speeding up and becoming more dense. Then of course you kind of get these sweet spots between the density and the size as well, which is how you kind of create the characteristics of your sound. You can also see that we can sync this to the tempo as well, or we can leave it as free, which is what we've got here. We've then got a density randomization, so we can select whether we want it to become more dense or less dense. So if we turn it up, so at the moment we've got it set to become more dense. If we bring that down, it'll become more obvious. So we get this very kind of randomized speed there. And again, this is good for kind of creating a natural flowing feel, like with the size. If we keep it at the same point with the density randomization turned off, then we're going to get a very kind of uniform sound that doesn't change a lot, whereas we're going to get a much more natural sound by turning it up and kind of randomizing that. And then of course we can make it less dense as well. If we turn that up, So there you go, you can kind of hear that we're randomizing when those grains actually sound. Okay, so let's turn that off for now. And then we've got a direction control here. So this is going to control the direction of the grain playback. So if it's set to 100% forward, our grains are going to be playing forward. Okay, so it's going to be playing like the sample from start to the finish of the grain. We can then go to 100% backward, which means it's going to reverse these grains and it's going to actually play that in reverse. And we can kind of pick somewhere in between. So 100% forward, 100% backwards. We can hear that a bit better with that attack there. And then you can kind of have it somewhere in between, which essentially sets the probability of whether the grains are going to sound forwards or backwards. And it allows us to kind of, again, create this sort of randomization and this kind of natural flowing sound to it, rather than just having this kind of static thing that carries on. Okay, so then we've also got pitch randomization. So let's just put that back there a little bit. So as you can hear, this randomizes the actual pitch of our grains, and you can use it very subtly by just offsetting them ever so slightly, or you can have it going absolutely insane. And you can change whether this is going higher than our root note, lower than our root note, or both directions. Okay, and then we can also randomize our start point. So what this does is it essentially means that we're randomizing where the grain is kind of taken from around our actual start that we set using this knob here. So our big white line here, we're going to be randomizing where we take the actual start, and we can set it to be before that part, which would be this area here, after it, which would be this area here, or both sides. So if we turn that off, we get a very kind of plain sound, because it's literally just triggering that one tiny particular point over and over and over again for every single grain. And then we can open it up, and obviously we can go quite extreme, and you can see these smaller white lines kind of show where it's taking that grain from. So it's a little bit all over the place. But just like with everything, you know, these controls all have sweet spots and they all have uses, and they can all be used in moderation to create some really nice sounds. So for instance, let's just create a pad sound really quickly. So I'm going to come here, turn my attack up a bit, and my release. Okay, and sample start. I want to kind of pick this smooth decay here, which would be nice for a pad. And then turn the time up a bit. Randomize it in both directions. Turn the density up a little. Randomize that. Turn a little bit of pitch up there. Let's turn our sample randomization, start point randomization up. A little bit of volume. And let's do some stereo panning. And of course we want it to be a bit more abrupt. We can pull that back, or we can smooth it off, which is what I want to do for this pad. And now, of course, we can run this through the filter. I'm just going to put a little high pass on that as well, because it's got this kind of low bit that's rumbling slightly. Bit of reverb. And there we go, we've got sort of smooth, atmospheric, ambient pad, which has this kind of organic quality. But of course it's completely different from the original sound, which if we go back to the original sound, so new preset, sample, there we go. Completely different sound. And that is how you can use the Granular engine to create all sorts of different things. Hopefully this gives you the knowledge to kind of start experimenting with the Granular engine and be able to know what exactly it is you're changing when you go to it. So now you can hopefully take that knowledge and start to create your own sounds and start experimenting with what this works on, what it doesn't work with, and what the particular uses for it might be for you. If you'd like to download some free presets for Arturia Pigments, head to synthvault.net now and sign up to become a member. Membership is completely free, and every single month you'll get new presets for Pigments, Omnisphere, Yuhi synths, and a wildcard synth, which is different every single month. You'll also get advanced access to these tutorials so that you can help improve your sound design skills. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, take care.